Jó reggelt, Magyarország, and this is pretty much about all I can say in Hungarian. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like, first of all, to express my thanks to Dr. Kalman, Zoltán Váci, and to the Esterházy Karoli University for this invitation. It's been a long time since I last have been in Hungary, more than 30 years ago, but it was a voyage of discovery, especially when I learned about such nice wines that you have in your country. So without any further ado, I'll get into my presentation of today. What I am bringing you here is a proposal based on the understanding of how the wine industry across the world and mainly in Europe has evolved over the last 80 years. And I will show you that through the lens of my company, of which I will provide a few details later on, the company I work for, that has been a player on this the change, on this transformation that I have used to give the title for today's lecture, From Green Revolution to Green Devolution, and using this concept to foster a nature-positive approach to developing a wine business. Now, we all know that many years in the past, what you see here on the left side of this slide used to be the norm. Vineyards, just like if they were factories. And today, mindsets are changing. We are moving from an approach based on process management to an approach based on fine-tuning systems, understanding that complexity is an ally, not a nuisance, not a negative aspect of what we do. So, a bit of a historical setback so that we can understand. Viticulture was focused mostly on experience, on trying to get by. It was in many instances a question of survival, and most of the wines were made to be drunk locally. Yet this is not necessarily negative. Experience allowed for intuitive management. On the other hand, it meant that progress was very slow. And in fact, I was finished reading a book that was written in the century by the end of the Roman Empire by an agricultural expert called Palladius. And it is quite obvious that everything that we have been doing in agriculture and viticulture up to the 20th century was pretty much based on the same concepts that they already knew in the 5th century. So pretty much very little progress over 14 centuries, 1,400 years. Now, after the Second World War, with the goal to eradicate hunger from humanity, science was brought to farms. And that brought an industrialized view of farming, focusing on efficiency more than anything else, trying to get the most out of it with as little as possible inputs. So the use of fertilizers, pesticides, plant breeding became the norm. And this worked quite well until it attained a level of evolution that could not progress without destroying the very same resources that we were using. And especially with climate change, when the context became too variable, we realized that the system, the agriculture system simply lacked the resilience. For as much efficient as it could be, it lacked the resilience necessary to withstand change. And this is what we see today. And this is not just a poly-crisis where loss of biodiversity couples with the change in climate, and they feed each other in a very negative loop. So what we see actually is that when we try to solve climate change through climate mitigation by decreasing carbon outputs and so on, we actually have a lot of negative impacts on biodiversity, and we further accelerate biodiversity loss. This is what you see here on this chart. So the red lines mean negative impacts on biodiversity actions. However, on the other hand, if we focus primarily biodiversity conservation actions, then we have a lot less negative impacts, even also for climate change. So this work shows very clearly that we cannot solve climate change without using biodiversity. And also that this is a complex crisis. No quick fix can be used alone. We need more than just one approach to solve it. Yet biodiversity recovery becomes well more effective than mitigation. And that is something we know from systems science that has demonstrated for some time now that when you look at sustainability, efficiency is, when you increase efficiency, you lose resilience. And that you get the maximum possible sustainability when you balance efficiency with resilience. This is true of ecosystems, this is true of economic systems, this is true of all abides by these rules. So what we were doing before the 1950s was focusing too much on the resilience and too little on efficiency. With time and with the Green Revolution, we moved our systems towards a lot more efficiency, but lost resilience in the process. What we are required today is cycling back a bit in efficiency so that we can again obtain sustainability and balance resilience with efficiency. This balance is attained by using diversity of the elements in the system and also the interconnectivity. These 2 points are absolutely critical in correctly managing systems. And because silver bullets do not work here, because this requires a more complex approach. This is also why after a quick pickup of organic farming across the world, we are coming to a point where it doesn't seem to solve all the problems. And actually on this article published in the New York Times in 2012, it says very clearly what we are seeing today. Organic farming does have many potential upsides, but it isn't a panacea. So we need to evolve on the concept of organic. And the FAO proposal of a new concept called agroecology seems to be quite an interesting solution. So let me now introduce you to the company I work for, a company called Sograp. This is the largest wine company in Portugal. It is considered the incumbent of the Portuguese wine industry. And I have been working here for 37 years, so I have a very good experience of what happened in these last 4 decades in the company. So the company was created during the Second World War with a very famous wine called Mateus Rosé that attained about 70 million bottle sales by the 1970s. Then sales started to decline, and the company during the 1980s diversified, first acquiring companies in port wine, then starting to plant vineyards across different parts of the country. By the 1990s, the company initiated a process of internationalization, which brought connectivity to the organization. And after the year 2010, we started to consolidate as a true Iberian company. Actually, today, we are the only wine company in Iberia producing wine both in Portugal and Spain. Just a few numbers for you to have an idea of the size of the company. So we have 1,200 workers, 1,200 staff. We farm 1,600 hectares of vineyards, about 1,000 of those in Portugal alone. Our turnover is in excess of 300 million euros, and we sell more than 120 bottles per minute across the world. So this is a company that combines a global footprint with a family vision, because this is still a family-owned company. And we are in the process of transforming the business, even though it is a good business, because we believe that if you accommodate, that's your best recipe for failure and for death. Now, the bet of the company in the Portuguese and the European wine sectors comes also from the fact that we have very clear that both Portugal and Europe are important regions for wine. In the case of Portugal, I will talk about this a few slides later. We have more than 200 native grape varieties. We have Atlantic Mediterranean climates. We are an important producer even at the global level, and wine represents an important part of our economics. Europe on its side, it's also the most important continent for wine growing, for winemaking, and for wine consumption and exporting. So let me now, for those of you who have never been to Portugal, let me now explain you why Portugal is a singular country in terms of wine production. As you can see in this satellite picture here, Portugal stands in the corner of Southwest Europe between the Atlantic on its west side and the Mediterranean on its southeast side. This creates a very specific, a very unique situation where you see we have, in terms of temperature, so the northwest is mostly Atlantic dominated, whereas the southeast is more Mediterranean. We can see the same in terms of rainfall here. And then in terms of geology, as you can see, we have a patchwork of soils, very diverse soils, allowing for the production of very different wines. What is unique also about Portugal, this is a map of our wine regions, is that 100% of our territory is under at least one geographical indication for wine. And we are the only country in Europe to have such a situation. Another important thing to have in mind is that of the 6 main river basins in Iberia, 4 of them, Guadiana, Tejo, Douro and Minho, they drain through Portugal. So we have plenty of water coming from central Iberia onto our territory, which is a good thing because, as you can see on this map of aridity here, so the dryness of a climate-induced dryness, the eastern part of the country is quite dry, and so we have areas with a lot of aridity that, if it was not for the rivers, would not have enough water. Last but not least, in terms of grape varieties, we have a huge diversity. Portugal, especially southwest Portugal, is considered to be secondary center of domestication for Vitis vinifera across the world, after the Caucasus and the Middle East. In terms of recent developments in economics, we have been decreasing our acreage of vineyards, while at the same time keeping and even slightly increasing production, which is a testimony to the benefits of technology and modernization we have been able to put in our vineyards, especially if you look at the evolution of our exports in volume, but most especially in value, that has been growing for the last 10 years non-stop. In terms of sustainable practices, Since the 1990s, Portugal has been profiting from the European Union funding for integrated pest management. In 2013, integrated pest management became mandatory for all farmers. No one can farm in Portugal if they do not apply integrated pest management. What caused that the next gold standard in terms of sustainable farming would be integrated production. That is very much promoted in Portugal through the government, but also through private technical organizations like this one, Advid, that have been implementing concepts like functional biodiversity, for example, in our farming. The results are quite visible. If we look at the evolution in pesticide use between 2011 and 2021, we see that Portugal posted the highest decrease in pesticide use among all EU members, almost 40% in kilo of pesticides per hectare of utilized agricultural area, all pesticides combined. What is relevant, however, is that in the same period, we increased our exports in value and we increased our exports in volume, and so we also increased the average price of our wines. What this means is that the higher efficiency in pesticide use did not entail a loss in competitiveness, in a loss in profit for our wine producers. Another important aspect is Portugal, is that we are across the world the country with the highest per capita consumption of wine. These are OIV data. Actually, there is a catch here. We are not really the first one. The first one to be completely true is the Vatican. But because that is for other reasons, the OIV is not considering the Vatican in its statistics, and so Portugal is the next one. Now, what is relevant here is that being the country with the highest consumption per capita of wine, we are not among the first countries in Europe with a higher mortality tax due to alcohol abuse, which means that we have what we call a Portuguese paradox. That is, consumption of wine in moderation actually does not harm you. And that's because in Portugal we consume wine mostly at meals, we consume it on a daily basis, we don't do as a norm binge drinking at weekends, and therefore it is part of our lifestyle, of our culture, and the way we think about ourselves in the world. So what I'm going to show you now in my company is envisioning a pathway for resilience, how we are preparing the future for the next generation of family, which is right now coming online. So I already mentioned to you integrated production. We have been doing certified integrated production since 20 years. This means using functional biodiversity, but also ecosystem management, reduction in pesticides through the use of risk assessment to do our production work. But at the same time, we are doing this in the company, and we are demonstrating to outside farmers how we are doing it, so that it becomes a full movement of the Portuguese sector, and at the same time the company becomes a leader in these practices. Now, I told you that we are present in Portugal and Spain. These are the regions where we have farms, and we have been developing an integrated view of viticulture by learning about our ecosystems, what we call nature-positive viticulture. By that, we have been creating data layers of information that we combine and integrate into geographical information systems, which are used by our vineyard managers to generate value in the market. So how do we generate this value? First of all, by using, for example, this, but also mixing clones of varieties, selected clones of varieties, to improve gains towards what we want to have. This is what we call polyclonal selection. It's a mix of 7 to 15 clones of the same variety that will reduce variability of performance in the vineyards as compared to clonal vineyards, where having just one clone, that clone will change according to the micro variations you find in soil, microclimate, and so on. And by using this approach, we have been able to show that we can select from 255 conserved clones of Tempranillo, for example. By selecting 12 of the most heat-tolerant ones, we can decrease the leaf surface temperature by about 3 degrees centigrade. We have seen this in Tempranillo and other varieties. We have seen even gains in terms of pest tolerance. Another area we have been developing work is in terms of climate smart decisions. We partnered into a European project that developed a system to seamlessly integrate historical climate data and future projections in the same tool, so that the vineyard manager can make his decisions based on the past, but also on measuring the forecast uncertainty and understanding what is the risk of the decision they are making. We developed a biosensor for soil health using earthworms. This is filing a patent of the biosensor we developed, should be commercialized in a few years. We have been looking into the possibility of using plant extracts for plant protection, as they have fungicidal action, but also as protective against oxidation in wine. So those are two areas we have been looking very carefully. These two projects were looking at integrating different solutions towards decreasing the use of pesticides and increasing the granularity of our work by integrating variable rate application, remote detection, and GPS tracking, for example, or doing copper management by integrating the use of bioproducts with risk assessment, or even by developing, in this case, a weeding robot that could also be converted into an autonomous sprayer in the vineyard, even on slope vineyards, as is the case of the Douro Valley. All this work, however, is not enough. And why is that? Because we all know that it's not possible to do business in a dead planet. So we need nature. We need nature in our vineyards. We need nature in our business. The only way that we can have nature as part of our business is engaging in this transformation. So how do we do that? This is another project we have been developing in terms of understanding our ecosystems. So we look at our vineyards, we characterize the different parts where we have the crop, where we have bush, woods, or fields, or waterways and wetlands, and then we manage the diversity of different species in there, getting different food products from those same areas, like fruit jams, cheese from the sheep we use to graze on the vineyards and do a biological type of weeding. And we have converted also all this knowledge from different projects into wine tourism products. So in this case, for example, in one of our vineyards in the Douro Valley, we created a biodiversity trail. It's a self-guided trail that our visitors can just walk through for about 1 hour. It's about 1 kilometer long. And they have this type of boards and panels explaining what we are doing to conserve nature and how that nature conservation brings us benefits in terms of producing quality and conserving the places where we are. And in the end, they will finish the tour with a tasting of products from the region. In this way, we give the visitors a memory of the sustainable wine farm. And we transform what is an approach in product to an approach to the experience and finally to the lifestyle. But that's not all. We also use nature elements in the crafting of our wine brands. We have wine brands with names and images from the wild species, plants, birds, and other animals that we find in our vineyards. Because for us, adaptation is about business development. So we are devolving a sense of nature to our consumers. And what we are doing is that enjoying wine is not about just the wine anymore. It's about life, it's about living, it's about lifestyle. So to end, I would like to leave you with these two messages. The United Nations has established, and all countries there have agreed, that we have about 5 years until 2030 to move from this line that we have been trailing to this line of nature recovery. And this is what, as a company, we are trying to contribute to. We want nature because we want business. And by doing that, we have an opportunity to lead the agriculture sector because wine as a sector is very well positioned to communicate with the public and with consumers. So this is about it. If you are interested about what I have just shown you, feel free to contact me. You have my contacts here. I am on LinkedIn, I am on X, and you also have my email here. And you can look on the website of Graça. All our research projects and our sustainability achievements are detailed in there. So I end this presentation just telling you, köszönöm a figyelmet.